Human beings are capable of incredible feats of art, science, and compassion. But throughout history, we've also shown a terrifyingly dark side. Long before modern justice systems focused on rehabilitation, the goal of punishment was often one thing: maximum agony. In the ancient and medieval worlds, execution wasn't just about ending a life. It was a theatrical performance of power. It was designed to break the spirit before it broke the body. Today, we're peeling back the curtain on the most creative, chilling, and downright stomach-turning methods of torture ever devised. Grab a seat and maybe skip the snacks for this one. These are the worst punishments in history. 1. The Brazen Bull. We start in ancient Greece, the supposed cradle of democracy, but it was also home to the Brazen Bull. Created by Pericles of Athens for the tyrant Phalaris, this was a hollow life-size statue made entirely of bronze. The method was simple but effective. The victim was locked inside the belly of the bull through a side hatch. A fire was stoked underneath, heating the metal until it was glowing red. The truly twisted part? The bull's head was designed with a complex system of pipes and whistles. As the victim screamed in agony, the sound was distorted and amplified, making it sound like the lowing of a maddened bull. Legend says Phalaris was so disgusted by the inventor's pride in the device that he made Pericles the bull's very first test subject. Once the inventor was half dead from the heat, he was pulled out and thrown off a cliff. 2. Scaphism, the boats of Persia. Often cited as the most gruesome execution method of all time, scaphism, or the boats, was a Persian specialty. The victim was stripped and trapped between two narrow boats or hollowed-out logs, with their hands and feet sticking out. They were then force-fed a mixture of milk and honey until they developed severe, uncontrollable diarrhea. Then more honey was smeared over their face and eyes to attract insects. Left to float on a stagnant pond, the victim would be eaten alive by swarms of wasps, bees, and flies. Worse still, the parasites attracted to the waste would begin to breed inside the victim's own body. It could take over 2 weeks for the victim to finally succumb to septic shock, gangrene, or dehydration. 3. The breaking wheel. If you lived in medieval Europe, the breaking wheel was the ultimate deterrent. It wasn't just about death, it was about the complete destruction of the human frame. The victim was tied to a large wagon wheel. The executioner would then use a heavy iron bar to systematically smash the bones in their limbs, starting with the forearms and moving to the shins and thighs. The goal was to break the bones without killing the person. Once the limbs were pliant, they were woven through the spokes of the wheel like rope. The wheel was then hoisted onto a tall pole. Victims often lived for days in this contorted position, staring at the sky while birds pecked at them, waiting for their hearts to finally quit. 4. Lingji, death by 1,000 cuts. In China, from the 10th century until as recently as 1905, the ultimate punishment for high treason was lingji. The executioner would use a sharp knife to methodically remove small portions of the body, fingers, toes, ears, and pieces of flesh, over an extended period. This wasn't just about physical pain, it was spiritual. In Confucian belief, a body that was not whole in death was a disgrace to the soul in the afterlife. Sometimes the executioner would be bribed to deliver a killing blow early, but for the most serious crimes, the victim was kept alive for as long as possible, sometimes enduring hundreds of cuts before the final stab to the heart. 5. The Iron Maiden, a spiked confinement. You've seen it in movies, an upright sarcophagus lined with spikes. While historians debate how often the Iron Maiden was actually used, the concept alone is a psychological nightmare. The device featured double doors with spikes positioned specifically to miss vital organs. This ensured that when the doors were closed, the victim wouldn't die instantly. Instead, they would be pierced in the eyes, chest, and limbs, left to bleed out slowly in total darkness and silence, unable to move even a fraction of an inch without driving the spikes deeper. 6. Rat torture. This method didn't require fancy engineering, just a hungry rodent. Popularized during the Dutch Revolt, rat torture is the stuff of phobias. A ceramic or metal bowl containing a live rat was placed upside down on the victim's bare stomach. Hot coals were then placed on top of the bowl. Terrified by the rising heat and having no way out, the rat would panic. Its instinct was to dig. With no other escape route, the rat would begin to gnaw its way through the victim's soft flesh and organs to get away from the fire. 7. The Blood Eagle, Viking ritual. Whether the blood eagle was a literary invention or a real Viking ritual remains a hot topic, but its description in the Norse sagas is unforgettable. The victim, usually a high-ranking enemy, would be placed face down. Their ribs were severed from the spine with a sharp tool and bent outward to resemble wings. The executioner would then pull the victim's lungs out through the back and sprinkle them with salt. If the victim stayed silent through the ordeal, it was said they earned a place in Valhalla. If they screamed, their soul was considered lost. 8. The bamboo torture. In Southeast Asia, nature itself was weaponized. Bamboo torture exploited the incredible growth rate of the bamboo plant, which can grow up to several feet in a single day. The victim was tied down securely over a patch of freshly sprouting bamboo shoots. As the plants grew, their sharp, needle-like tips would slowly pierce through the victim's skin. Over the course of several days, the bamboo would literally grow through the victim's body, causing a slow, agonizing death as organs were perforated by the relentless greenery. 9. The rack. The rack was the centerpiece of the Spanish Inquisition. It was a wooden frame with rollers at both ends. The victim's wrists were tied to one roller and their ankles to the other. As the torturer turned the handle, the body was pulled in opposite directions. First, the joints would dislocate with loud, sickening pops. If the victim didn't confess, the tension was increased until tendons and ligaments snapped. In extreme cases, the limbs were completely torn from their sockets. 10. Flaying, the living anatomy. Flaying, or peeling the skin from a living person, was practiced by the Assyrians, the Aztecs, and during the Middle Ages. Using incredibly sharp knives, the executioner would peel the skin from the body, often trying to keep it in one continuous piece. Death usually occurred due to shock, massive blood loss, or infection. In some ancient civilizations, the skin was then pinned to city walls or draped over thrones as a grim warning to anyone who dared to defy the ruler. 11. The Catherine wheel, breaking on the cross. Similar to the breaking wheel, the Catherine wheel was a variant used specifically for those deemed heretics. The victim was tied to a wheel and beaten with hammers, but then the wheel was set on fire. The combination of shattered bones and third-degree burns ensured that the victim experienced every possible level of sensory agony before death finally arrived. 12. Boiling to death. Reserved for poisoners and counterfeiters in 16th century England, boiling was a legally sanctioned death sentence. The victim was lowered into a large vat of water, oil, or even molten lead. Sometimes they were put in while the liquid was already boiling for a quick death. Other times they were put in cold water, which was slowly heated to a boil, extending the suffering as the skin began to blister and peel away while they were still conscious. 13. Crucifixion. The Romans perfected crucifixion as a way to execute non-citizens and rebels. It was designed to be the most shameful and public way to die. Contrary to popular belief, you didn't die from blood loss. You died from a combination of exhaustion and asphyxiation. To breathe, the victim had to push up on their nailed feet to relieve the pressure on their chest. Eventually, the legs would give out, the chest would collapse inward, and the victim would slowly suffocate under their own weight. 14. Keel hauling. For sailors, keel hauling was a punishment that often ended in a watery grave. A sailor was tied to a rope that passed under the ship's hull. They were dropped into the ocean on one side and dragged underneath the ship to the other. If the sailor didn't drown, the barnacles on the bottom of the ship, which were as sharp as razor blades, would shred their skin to ribbons. Most victims died from their wounds or shark attacks shortly after being pulled back on deck. 15. Sawing. Used in various parts of Europe and Asia, sawing was exactly what it sounds like. The victim was hung upside down, which ensured that blood remained in the head, keeping them conscious for as long as possible. Two executioners would then take a large saw and begin cutting the person in half, starting from the crotch. Because of the inverted position, many victims remained alive and awake until the saw reached their mid-chest or even their neck. 16. The pear of anguish. This was a specialized tool used for those accused of witchcraft or sexual deviance. The pear was a metal device with 4 leaves. It was inserted into a body orifice and then expanded by turning a screw. The mechanical force would tear internal tissues and shatter bones from the inside out. While it rarely killed the victim on its own, the internal damage and resulting infections were almost always fatal. 17. The white torture. We wrap up with a method that uses no blades, no fire, and no blood. White torture is a form of psychological punishment used in modern times. The prisoner is kept in a room where everything is perfectly white. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, their clothes, and even their food. There is no sound, no color, and no social interaction. Within days, the human brain begins to hallucinate. The lack of sensory input causes a total breakdown of the personality. Survivors often say they would have preferred physical pain to the soul-crushing void of the white room. Looking back at these methods, it's easy to feel a sense of relief that we live in the 21st century. But these punishments serve as a grim reminder of how far we've come and the depths of cruelty the human mind is capable of when justice is replaced by vengeance. Which of these did you find the most terrifying? Is there a historical punishment we missed? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this video fascinating in a dark sort of way, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the shadows of history. Thanks for watching and stay safe out there.